Cherry, a suggestion maybe next time is to have some, background music. So it's not like
a
completely
suggestion maybe
like
next time is to have
quiet,
some,
lively.
background music.
You want me to sing a few bars?
Yes. Bring out your guitar. Okay. So like those sitting in the first row, those are like good students, good trying what am I saying? Okay, it's 11 o'clock. Let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year 2022. Who is ready to crush it for another year? Who had the best year in 2021? Anybody?
Me.
Okay, great. I can imagine like a lot of people here are like, had their best year in their career. Because, most of the people that I talk to is like, yeah, like 2021 is I made the most money throughout my real estate career. So I hope everyone had the same kind of like had a great year last year and ready to crush it 2022. Like last week, as we were, you know, celebrating Christmas and whatnot, we still have like a few days. Like, okay, 2022 is not here yet. We still have a few more days to plan for it and things like that. But bam, like we are here, 2022. Oh my gosh, like there's just a lot to do. But today we have the honor and pleasure to have a wonderful guest, Bob Gibbons. He's in Dallas, Texas. Um, very seasoned commercial real estate broker, and not just broker. I mean, his background covers like he gone through like from asset managing property management. So he's like a all-rounded commercial real estate guy. So I have the privilege to invite him today to kind of share with you all about commercial real estate, how he gets started in the business, what are the challenges, and of course, all the deals that he have worked on, clients that he have helped throughout. I think Bob, is it like 30 plus years you were in the industry?
38 next month.
Okay, so you start when you were like 5, right? So, building your empire. But rather than me kind of, butcher his like experience, I'd rather have him personally kind of share with you guys like how he gets started in the business, and all that good stuff. And hopefully you guys can kind of inspire by his story, and then also like what his kind of like forecast about um, where the real estate is going, commercial real estate is going. So with that said, Bob, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, jump in with questions anytime. And if there's anything that you want me to specifically address other than what you and I have already talked about, Calvin, let me know. But anyway, thanks for letting me be here today. I am Bob Gibbons. I'm a corporate real estate advisor. My company is REATA, REATA, Commercial Realty. And the REATA is an acronym which stands for Real Estate Advisor and Tenant Advocate. And as Calvin mentioned, I've been in the business 38 years, which seems like a heck of a long time for somebody my age, but it is. I actually got in the business in February of 1984 while I was a junior in college at University of Texas at Arlington. And I was not quite 20 years old, and I'd been building cabinets for houses as a way to earn my way through college. And I was tired of that business. It's a tough business. It's hot in the summer. It's cold in the winter. You risk losing fingers and, and arms in saws. And I wanted to move on to something else. So I went to the Student Employment Office, of all things, at the University of Texas at Arlington. And at that time, we didn't know what the internet was. And so the Student Employment Office literally had 3x5 cards taped to a window, and the would have a title of what the job was. And I saw one that said Market Research Analyst, and I thought, wow, that sounds impressive. Of course, I had no idea what it meant, but I responded to the ad, and it turned out that it was a one-man commercial real estate company that was looking for a sidekick, somebody that would help him on deals. And furthermore, it turned out that his one-man real estate company actually was a subsidiary of a Belgian investment company. So these guys from Belgium had come over to the U.S. to go to graduate school at the University of Dallas in Irving, which is a Catholic school that has a lot of international students. And the guy that I was working for, who was an American, had gone to school there as well. They'd gotten to be friends. The Belgian guys set up their own investment company and started buying big tracts of land throughout DFW using money from foreign investors. And so I was hired to help. Paul was the guy I worked for, to try and sell those big tracts of land. So we not only were trying to market those as brokers, but I would go out and set up the big for sale signs, set them in concrete on the property, and we would protest the taxes, and we would arrange for the grass to be mowed, that kind of thing. Even to maintain an agricultural exemption, we might arrange with a lease for a farmer to bale the hay or to run their cattle on the property, that kind of thing. So it was interesting. Here I am, not quite 21 years old, starting to do that kind of stuff, trying to learn the ropes, and I look like a child, and so it had its challenges at times. But about a month after I joined that company, they bought 46 acres of land downtown Dallas around the farmers market. And that 46 acres was the old Southern Pacific Railroad tracks that came into downtown Dallas. And there were 33 industrial buildings on that property. And they thought, like I said, this was 1984, so everybody had giant plans for what the future was going to look like. And so they had expectations that they were going to demolish all of those buildings and start building high-rise office buildings and hotels and a big festival marketplace and all kinds of stuff. And it sounded exciting. These guys were really not the right people to pull that off. And then when the depression of 1986 started, the real estate depression, not the overall economy depression, but the real estate depression started after the 1986 tax law took effect. It just killed everything. And so that plan for that development went away. But we'd already started demolishing buildings. I think we ended up demolishing like 15 or 18 buildings while I was there. We were also buying up big chunks of land down in the Cedars area. I was part of a group of brokers to do a big land assembly down in the Cedars area. So we ended up having a lot more property down there that we had to take care of as well. So I ended up in this situation where I was not only a broker trying to sell property, but also managing property. And so it was pretty interesting. And I got to learn a lot of stuff in a short amount of time, because it was really the guy I worked for and me, and then occasionally we'd have other people work with us.
So it's kind of like you kind of stumble across this opportunity, and it turn out this opportunity kind of go to more than kind of expect, right? So you started like assembling land, and then demolish, coming from a cabinet making, right, that you kind of like suffer in the summer and suffer in the cold, to like doing bigger things, bigger deals in downtown Dallas, right? So you're assembling all this land
Well,
for
the
company?
46 acres actually had been assembled by another group. The Northrop family had already assembled all the 46 acres, so we didn't really have anything to do with the assembly of that. But Belgian company I worked for bought that 46 acres as one big block, and they actually came to my boss and I and basically said, you know, here's it was literally just a piece of paper with a square, and they said, all right, here's I-30, here's I-45, here's Commerce Street, and here's Harwood. We own everything in the middle. Go manage it. They didn't give us leases. They didn't give us legal descriptions. They didn't give us anything. And so we literally went door to door, knocking on the doors saying, are you our tenant? And if so, can we get a copy of the lease? I mean, it was ridiculous. And so for probably about 3 or 4 months, we didn't really have a really strong handle on what it was that we were supposed to be managing and what we were supposed to be doing with all this stuff. So yeah, then the land assembly came later on the south side of I-30 in the Cedars area, and that was planned to be a big urban revitalization project as well. But again, the timing didn't work out. We didn't assemble enough land to really make that possible. So, and you know, the sad news is that like so many companies in the late 80s, the company ended up going under 1988. I actually had stayed with the company after I graduated high school. I'm sorry, college. And so I was with the company almost 4.5 years. And so when they finally went under in 1988, I think it was around June or so, I bailed out to a company called Prentice Properties based in downtown Dallas. And they owned high-rise office buildings and warehouse properties, and they also managed properties for other owners. And so I went the property management route at that point and became a property manager of large office buildings and worked with them in Dallas-Fort Worth and got transferred to Los Angeles and then to Austin, back to Dallas-Fort Worth. And, you know, eventually I had, I don't know, about 5 million square feet of commercial properties that I was responsible for overseeing in DFW, Austin, San Antonio, Denver, Amarillo, Chicago, Milwaukee. And so I was on the road a lot. And that was a pretty good gig. I did that for about 8 years. And then I was really tired of being a property manager. And I ended up getting a job with a company based in Chicago, but I was here in DFW. And I was the one of the 4 regional VPs of asset management and leasing. And it was a family-owned company. They'd been around about 95 years when I joined them. And it was a great gig. Man, being an asset manager, I loved. You know, I was the guy responsible for overseeing the overall financial performance of a portfolio of properties. And when I joined them, I had 7 office buildings in Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, and San Antonio. And within the first 3 years, my portfolio went from 7 buildings to 30 buildings. And the buildings what I'm talking about are, you know, anywhere from 100 to 300,000 square foot office buildings, mostly suburban office buildings. And so we added Houston, we added Phoenix, we had 18 buildings in Dallas Fort Worth at the peak. And, you know, 30 buildings was too many for a asset manager. So we ended up having to hire another person. I offloaded Houston and Phoenix to that person, and I kept Dallas Fort Worth and Austin. And then I also picked up Northern Virginia for a little while, but we quickly sold out of Northern Virginia. So that was a great gig. I loved it. We did, you know, all kinds of stuff. I was involved in, you know, I didn't source the deals, meaning I wasn't the guy that went out and found the buildings to buy and negotiated those deals, but I had to sort of sign off on what his assumptions were, because, you know, if he assumed we were going to be able to get a $25 rental rate, I had to be the guy to deliver that. And so I had to sign off on his assumptions saying, yeah, I think these are realistic and I can deliver that. And then I was involved in the sales. Again, we had somebody else who was the quarterback for that, but, you know, was involved in that. But then during the hold period, you know, the property managers, I had to oversee and improve their budgets, capital expenditures. I had to approve all the leases and direct the leasing program. I had 3 leasing agents that worked for me here in DFW. We outsourced the leasing in Houston and Phoenix and Austin. But yeah, it was a good gig. I would have never left if they hadn't laid me off.
Great. Sounds like it's a good gig that kind of, you added more properties while you're an asset manager. And so what is the difference between, just for the benefit for the audience, what's the main difference between asset manager and property manager for commercial real estate?
Yeah, and that's a good question, Calvin, because a lot of companies have what I call title creep. That you start off, in the 1980s, and everybody's called a property manager, and then by the 2000s, everybody's being called the asset manager, but it's the same job. A property manager is really the person responsible for the property level details, meaning managing all the contracts for landscaping and electricity and repairs and maintenance, and paying all the bills and collecting the rent from the tenants. They're the primary liaison or contact on behalf of the landlord for the tenants. And so that person has sort of property level responsibility for all those details. They create the budgets, all that kind of stuff. The asset manager is at a higher level, and they don't, if you're the property manager, you probably don't do the leasing. You might, some companies do let their property managers do leasing. In fact, when I joined CMD, which was the company based in Chicago, where I was an asset manager, we had, for the first 3 years, a single person responsible for each property who had responsibility for both property management and leasing. And I will tell you, that was not a good plan. That was not a good business model, because skills that it requires to be a good property manager are not the same skills required for being a leasing agent. One has a lot of inherent conflict, being a leasing agent, where you're negotiating leases, whereas a property manager is much more focused on details and making sure everybody's happy and the tenants are good and everybody's fulfilling their responsibilities on the lease. So putting somebody in a position where they're having to do both the property management and the leasing created a lot of conflict within those individuals. And so after 3 years, we split that and created a separate property management division. And everybody then became either a property manager or a leasing agent, but not both. And everybody was much happier. Everybody said either, oh, thank God I'm not a property manager anymore, I hated dealing with all those details. Or they said, thank God I'm not a leasing agent anymore, because I hated having to deal with the conflict that sometimes creates. And so that's one thing I would say is definitely, in most situations, if you're not the owner of the building, the owner of the building is probably better off, and the employees are probably better off splitting those functions. With the asset manager, on the other hand, then both the property management and leasing ultimately report to the asset manager, because the asset manager has full financial responsibility for the property. So what's the best way to maximize the value of a building? Keep it leased. Keep it leased at high rates, as high as possible, and to minimize your expenses. But you got to be careful on minimizing expenses, because if you get the expenses too low, then you're not maintaining the building to the level that of the class you think the building is, and the class of the rental rates you're charging. So if you're charging a $40 rental rate, but you're maintaining the building as if it's a $25 building, you got a problem, and tenants are going to start moving out, or you're not going to get new tenants. So there's a balance there on the operating expenses as to how you maintain those. So the asset manager is always taking that perspective of what is the way to maximize the value of the building, and that includes the leasing and the property management. But it involves a lot of other stuff beyond that. A lot of discounted cash flows. We use Argus software system, where we would put in all kinds of assumptions to determine what the impact of each deal we did would have on the value of the building. So if we had let's say we had a full floor building tenant coming up for expiration, and we were negotiating with that company, we might run a new Argus run on, what if we do this deal at this number, Or what if we do it on that number? So a lot of like A/B testing, if we do this deal, this is the impact of the value. If we do that deal, this is the impact of the value. And so we would put in those different assumptions and have those numbers help us determine what our goal was, because ultimately we had investors we were responsible for or responsible to deliver the returns that we had promised them. And so we needed to make sure that every time we made a decision that was either in support of or we had good reasons to do something in spite of that.
Yeah. For those in the audience, right? So most of the buildings that you see in downtown CBD or like Class A properties, right? Luxury properties. Oftentimes, those commercial properties are owned by a institutional fund or a big family office, and whenever they, like the fund or institutional, they will have this asset manager, right? Asset managers, asset management department. So if let's say if you want to up your game, you said, hey, I really want to go into commercial leasing. I want to go target those Class A buildings. So how do you get those businesses? By meeting the asset managers and see if they would give you the opportunity. So with Bob's background in asset management, he just shared asset manager what they do daily is to see how they can maximize the numbers, right? Because commercial risk is it's all about numbers, how to maximize the return, the ROI, how to get the highest rent in the block. So asset manager is the person that kind of like call the shot. So if you are the commercial leasing broker, you will report to asset manager. The asset manager will have most of the time it's like either a weekly meeting or bi-weekly meeting, just to kind of stay on top of how the performance of the buildings, the shopping centers, or the office buildings and things like that. And you will work very closely with the asset manager in executing their strategy. So you know you know Bob really has tons of experience coming from property management, asset management, brokers, leasing, and I think he's gonna kind of share more about what he's doing more recently, right? So what do you do
Sure.
after your role? What do you go from that? Did you just left the asset management role to become a broker, or
Well,
what did you do after?
not intentionally. As I mentioned earlier, I got laid off. So yeah, I as much as I love the asset manager gig, I didn't really know how good I had it, because as an asset manager, I was an employee of the investment company that owned the buildings. We did have large institutional backers, so we had wealthy families, we had pension funds, we had college endowment funds. All those were our investors, and then of course we had lenders, that we had to deal with as well. But anyway, so when the family that I worked for that owned our company, the family decided that they were going to start selling all the buildings and close down the company. And so that was a very sad thing because, like I said, it was a great job, a great gig. I liked the people I was working for. I would travel to Chicago every month for meetings with them and to other wherever my portfolio was. So I loved it. And so whenever they decided to start selling off the properties and close down the company, people got laid off as that happened. And my time came in April of 2004. So at that point, I'd been in the business 20 years. I'd never been laid off. And, my wife was a stay-at-home mom, homeschooling our kids. My kids were 11 and 14. So we had a single ownership, our single wage earner in the household. That's where our benefits were. And so all of a sudden we had no income and no benefits. And it was pretty scary. But I started going out looking for the next, traditional landlord gig job. And I found a few things, but nothing I was really excited about. And so I decided, you know what, maybe this is the time for me to go out on my own and become a tenant rep. And so I effectively, what I refer to as switching sides. So I switched sides from being a landlord agent, and for that first 20 years, I'd always represented the property side of the business. I'd always represented the owner, the seller, the landlord, and or the investor, and really had never worked with, as far as them being my client, the user of the property. Now, I worked with a ton of tenant rep brokers because, again, the best way to keep a building full is to have tenants in the building. And the best way to get tenants in your building is to develop relationships with the tenant rep brokers, the brokers that represent the companies, the nonprofits that occupy the space. So I'd worked with a ton of those, knew a ton of them, and I decided I'm going to become one of them. So I switched sides and became a tenant rep broker and helped put out my own shingle. That's when I created Riata as the name of the company. And I decided to work exclusively with users of real estate, and more specifically with users of office buildings primarily, and warehouses. So the first thing I did was very clearly identify my target client, my ideal client. And this is really probably the first thing I would say is the most important thing for somebody who's thinking about getting into commercial real estate is clearly identify exactly who your target client is, your ideal target client. Because if you don't know who your ideal target client is, how are you going to reach them? And it's just like anything. Like when I was looking for a job, I went to this job group and I was like, yeah, I've been in the business for 20 years. I've done all these different things. I can pretty much do anything. So any jobs you know about, let me know. Guess how many referrals I got? Zero. Nobody knew what to do with me. Telling somebody, my target client is anybody that drives a car, that's not helpful. People can typically bring to mind about 250 people that they know, but you got to help them, because if you just say, tell me all 250 of them, well, they can't do that. But if you say, I want to know somebody that who is in their 40s, they own their own home, they live in Collin County, and they originally came here from another country. They're not Native Americans. They're not U.S. citizens, let's say. Well, now you can shrink that down pretty fast and know off the top of your head maybe 2 or 3 or 4 names of people that fit that criteria. Well, you need to be able to do that with your prospective clients. So when somebody says, who do you want as a client? Who are you looking for? Give me your 30-second pitch. You need to be able to spit that off immediately, clearly and effectively, because I guarantee you, I don't care how clear you think you are, until you repeat it about 500 times for the people that you deal with regularly, they don't get it. For example, my ideal client is a business owner who still runs their own company, and they already lease space in an office building in Dallas and Collin County, a multi-story office building. They take the elevator to the office. Now, every one of you probably know several people that come to mind that fit that category. They own a business or they work for a business that leases space in an office building somewhere in Dallas and Collin County. Take the elevator to work. And let's hope they still do, and they're not still working from home, which is entirely likely, sadly. So that's my ideal client. But you can't believe how many people I get who give me referrals to, hey, yeah, I got a buddy over here who has an office. The lease is expiring. Oh, cool. I'm happy to talk to him. So I go talk to Jim. Well, it turns out Jim actually has a hair salon in a shopping center. It's not an office building. So that's what I'm talking about. You can be as specific as you think you are being, and as clear as you think you're being. That language doesn't necessarily translate to other people. So I created this ideal client profile, which was visual. I had the words, but I also showed photographs of the kinds of buildings that represented, to try and help people that I regularly partnered with and networked with would be able to see. I joined a networking group. I'm in a few mastermind groups, but I would physically show them on paper, this is what the building looks like, where my ideal client likely is. So identify your ideal client. And I would also say, you got to specialize. In commercial real estate, if you don't specialize, there's no reason somebody should hire you. If you go to a doctor, you don't just go to any doctor to get your gallbladder removed. You go to somebody who specializes in that. I have glaucoma in my eyes. I'm not going to go to a podiatrist to work on my eyeballs. That's just not going to happen. I'm going to go to an ophthalmologist who's not only an ophthalmologist, but an ophthalmologist specifically trained and specializing in glaucoma. Commercial real estate's the same thing.
Yeah, I can echo to that. Being in the commercial real estate industry for over 15 years myself, so specialization is very important. So it's in commercial real estate, it's yes, branding is important, but also sending a message out to prospective clients and whatnot. What you specialize is even more important, because like Bob said, right? And in commercial real estate, there's different property types. You got office, you got warehouse, you got retail, you have hotel, you got multifamily, you got land. It's a very broad category. Rather than taking a shotgun approach, like you try to grab all whatever that you can deal with, is to best focus on a specific niche market. This is particularly important for like a full-time commercial brokers, is having a specialization would help you in the long run be known as the expert, right? Whether like Bob is an office guy or he's the office expert or warehouse expert or retail expert, because you want to send a clear message to the marketplace. Like Bob said, right, sometimes like people refer clients to him where he's not, it's not really what he focused on specialize in, no matter how many times you talk. So having a specialization is very important in this marketplace. And also, whether you focus on representing the tenant, right, tenant rep, or you represent the landlord, where you focus on, targeting all those like institutional, talk to the asset manager and represent on that side, or represent the tenant side.
And Calvin, the other thing I would say about that, though, is that once you've identified your ideal client, you stay on message. And the only thing you ever tell people is that message. And you never waver from that. And you go further, where you never spend any marketing dollars except to your ideal client. I will never spend $1 marketing our services to an investor who has sold a piece of property in California and wants to buy something in Texas on a 1031 exchange. But guess what? I can do that if I want to. In fact, I'm doing 2 of those right now. I've never told anybody in the world that that's something I wanted to do, but I still get referrals, because ultimately people say, all right, Bob Gibbons, he's the commercial real estate guy, and they don't really understand all the nuances. So if it's commercial real estate, they're just going to send it to me or to Calvin or to Daniel. And that's totally fine. I mean, ultimately that's what you want, but you really want your ideal. You'll still get all kinds of other referrals that you can make the decision at that point. Is it worth doing that? I'll give you an example. I don't really want retail. Retail is not a good place for a tenant rep to be, because while the retail landlord is happy to pay us when we bring the tenant to them the first time, when that tenant's lease expires and the tenant wants me to help them renegotiate the lease, guess what? That landlord is not going to pay us a dime. So that means that almost all my retail clients, if I have any, I get to work with them one time and never again. So it's not a good place for a tenant rep to be. But several years ago, I got an Indian grocery store prospect who contacted me. They wanted to open up a 28,000 square foot Asian, Indian grocery store in Plano. Well, guess what? The commission on a 28,000 square foot grocery store is pretty dang good. And I knew exactly what I needed to do to help them. I was a good solution for them, even though normally I would turn away most retail people. I did that deal. It was a great commission. It was my biggest commission up to that point. And we ended up doing another one in Irving. So while I don't typically want to do retail, and if you come to me and say, hey, I've got somebody who has who wants to open up a 1,000 or 1,500 square foot CBD store, I'm just going to refer that to somebody else. I'm not going to do that myself because it's just not a good place. It takes too much time and all that. But for a 28,000 square foot grocery store, heck yeah, I'd do that deal again today.
Okay, let's switch gear a little bit. So now that you are, full-fledged commercial brokers that's focused on office tenant and then a warehouse, what do you suggest that, let's say people in the audience that, may have some clients that bought a house from them and then may have some business, how do you kind of like suggest that they maybe expand to the client or have a conversation with the clients that, hey, if you need any commercial help, or I mean, any suggestion on that?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I think that residential real estate agents leave a lot of money on the table because they don't engage their clients in the commercial conversation. I get referrals from residential agents all the time, and they had a conversation with their client, or more often than not, the client doesn't know who to call. So they're like, all right, I've got a real estate need. So they just call the only person they know in real estate, which is the person that helped them with their house. And then that person is a residential agent. They don't know anything about commercial. So fortunately, I happen to know them, or they happen to know somebody who knows me, that I get the referral. And so in that situation, then I handle the deal and I pay them a referral fee. We had a situation a few years ago where that exact thing happened. A guy who'd bought a house with an Ebby Halliday realtor, his company that he worked for, their lease was coming up. They outgrew their building. They wanted to buy a building. So he picks up the phone and calls the Ebby Halliday realtor. Well, she didn't know anybody, so she went to another guy in her office who she knew, and his name is Bruce, and Bruce happened to know Christy in my office. So he calls Christy, and Christy's like, yeah, we can help him. And so Christy and I go meet with the client, and we end up doing that deal. Well, it took us over 2 years to get that deal done. But when the deal was done, we ended up handing her a $22,000 referral fee. That's just the referral fee. And so she was pretty freaking happy about that. And in fact, she had totally forgot about having given us the referral in the first place. I mean, 2 years, you're not going to remember everything, right? And so, that's an example of how she made a pretty nice paycheck that day for something that she didn't have to do other than make a phone call. We have other residential realtors, one of the 1031 exchanges. In fact, both 1031 exchanges that I'm working on right now. One was from a residential agent with Remax, who used to be in a networking group with me many years ago. And, a family who's it's actually a guy who's a plastic surgeon in Beverly Hills. He and his wife sold a small apartment building in Los Angeles for $3.3 million. They wanted to do a 1031 exchange, but they wanted to do it in Texas because they hear about everything great happening in Texas. And they have family members in Texas. So, they called the woman they knew in real estate, which was this Remax realtor, and she handed off to me. The other one, I happen to be friends with the current chairman of the Texas Association of Realtors, Marvin Jolly. And so Marvin got a call from a residential agent saying, hey, do you know anybody in commercial? And he gave them my name, and it's another 1031, similar situation. So I don't even remember what your question was now, Calvin.
Well,
Sorry about that.
well, no problem. So for you guys, I know everyone had a great 2021. So if I can add a little bit to your plate, I know 2022 is going to be even a better year. If you want to make a little bit more money, is to have a conversation with the clients that you're helping with buying a house or whatnot. I mean, most of the time you already have a conversation and what they do, whether they own a business or things like that. Is to just just throw it out there and say, hey, if there's anything that you need in your business, whether you're looking to lease a commercial properties or buy or sell, I have a good group of commercial brokers, partners that can help you. So just making that connection by one phone call, like Bob said, like how big was that referral check?
22,000.
20,000. See, like that. I know that's only like maybe 0.005% of your commission, but hey, 22,000 is still 22,000. So maybe add that to your conversation. Just start thinking about that for your 2022. Whenever you help a client buy or sell a house, is to kind of get to know them a little bit more, and who knows, you can have kind of additional business. You can refer it out and then kind of expand to your business. So let's kind of also see audience. So again, like guys, this is we're very fortunate to have Bob on with us today. I want to make sure, like, if you have any questions or ideas, go ahead and ask that questions, and then Bob can give you like some directions and whatnot, or what he thinks. So let's open up for the audience and see if any other questions. So I see Rochelle. Yeah, Rochelle, go ahead.
How do you handle out-of-state deals?
Good question. Very carefully. If you don't have a license in another state, you got to be really careful. The most important thing I would say is, before you get on a plane or get in your car and drive to whatever that state is to start helping somebody, you better know what the real estate laws are in that state. There's a famous story of many of you may remember Roger Staubach, the famous Dallas Cowboys quarterback. Well, he had the largest tenant rep only real estate companies in the United States. And early on, when they were based here in Dallas, but they were always based in Dallas, but when they had no office in Atlanta, a couple of their people got on a plane and flew to Atlanta, Georgia to do a tour with a client. And they were met by police in the airport who'd been tipped off, who said, get back on that plane and go back home. You are not allowed to conduct real estate in the state. So be sure you know that. So what I do whenever I have a client who has interest in another state, which is not frequent, by the way, but occasionally it does happen. I've done a deal down up in Denver. I'm working on a deal in Atlanta right now. I've done a deal down in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So when you have an opportunity to do it in another state, number one, be clear as to what those laws are. But more importantly, you probably want to partner with somebody in another state who is an expert. I'm doing a deal in Albuquerque, New Mexico right now for a client. And, what do I know about Albuquerque? I've driven through it 100 times. But beyond that, I don't really know anything. I would not be doing my client a good service by trying to do that deal by myself. And, at the time we started that deal, my database didn't even include Albuquerque information, so I couldn't even look up property information. Now my CoStar database is national, so I can look that up now, so I can do a better job. But even still, do I really understand the nuances of each submarket? And there's always something about your city or your little submarkets that, if you're not living there, you probably don't know. And so, I'm a fiduciary to my client, which means I'm supposed to put my client's needs above my own. And so if there are 3 properties that we're looking at, and in fact, I had this exact situation happen a few years ago. We had a client whose building got blown down in a storm. We moved them into a temporary place in Las Colinas. And when their original building got rebuilt, they had the option to go back to their original building or to stay where they were. Well, they wanted to stay where they were. And had they stayed where they were, I would have made $15,000. If they moved back to their original building, I would have only made $1,000. Well, what do I do? What do I tell them? Well, first of all, I ignore what it means to me, and I tell them what is in their best interest. And I told them, I cannot foresee a business case that you can make for why you should stay in Las Colinas instead of going back to Bedford, where your building was. Your employees all are used to going there. Your clients are used to going there. It's far cheaper than Las Colinas. I mean, if you want to stay in Las Colinas, yeah, it's great for me, but why would you do that? And unfortunately, they agreed with me, and they went back to Bedford, and I got $1,000. But that's what I'm required to do. That's what our code of ethics would require. That's what good businesses should require. And if you're in the business for the long term, you're not just trying to score a quick commission. You always put the client first, and they will then come back to you to do future deals and or refer other people to you. So the main thing is with out of state, partner with somebody who's an expert. Y'all can agree on who's going to handle what responsibilities, and how you're going to split the fees.
Well, the good thing is like EXP is in all 50 states and then international, so you can, and plus we have, a good number of, EXP commercial brokers that you can partner up with locally. As
Yeah.
Bob said, right? I mean, the skill sets, it's very similar, but the local knowledge, right? The stock market knowledge, or, the information is where it provides more value to the client. So partner up with the local commercial brokers that can help you get the deal to the goal line is crucial. So, of course, definitely understanding the law, but, having that EXP, it's in all major 50 states, that should resolve that concern. Rochelle, does that answer your questions, or were you looking for something else?
No, that was it. That
Oh,
answered my questions. Or
okay.
the one. And the other is, how would you get up off the ground aside from going to the asset managers for the start? How would you approach them? Would you start with emails, phone calls? Would you go personally? I know that right now we're in the scare of the pandemic still. So would you try to manage an appointment physically with them, or how would you approach that?
Well, it really depends on the kind of business you're trying to get. So, I'll go back to my first statement of identify your ideal client. To identify your ideal client, you have to have already decided what kind of business you want to operate. So if you want to have a business like mine, where I only represent the users of the property, then I have no need to go talk to the asset managers, because the asset managers, they own the properties, they run the properties. I don't need them. They're not my client. I need to be introduced to business owners. So I have to go where the business owners are. But if I want to get listings of warehouses, office buildings, shopping centers for lease, I want to be their leasing agent, or I want to list the building for sale, then yeah, in those situations, you need to get in front of the decision makers for the owners, which may be the asset managers if it's an institutionally owned property, but it could also just be an individual. I mean, it could just be a guy like me or Calvin or Daniel or whomever. And so you have to put in the due diligence to go figure out who that is. The first thing I would recommend is that let's just say you want to become the expert on daycare centers in the northern suburbs of Dallas-Fort Worth. So you're going to basically go in all of Dallas County. I'm sorry, far northern Dallas County, Collin County, Denton County, and northern Tarrant County. And you're going to say, that's going to be my trade area, and I want to be the king of or queen of daycares. So in that situation, you have to go figure out where all the existing daycares are. You want to find out who those operators are, because, all right, maybe those are the people who would likely want to add another location at some point. You also want to find out who owns all those buildings, because they are likely not the same people as who operates the businesses in them. And so you want to start figuring out who all those people are. And then as you start figuring out who they are, and researching that industry, then you can start talking to them. And maybe you start off by just having an informational interview. Hey, I'm interested in your industry. I want to know more. I hear you're an expert. Would you give me 10 minutes of your time or 15 minutes of your time? And yeah, if you can get in front of them physically, that is always best. It's really hard to get a relationship with somebody going if it's by text, by email, by phone, even by Zoom. I mean, though that gets better each time. The more you get to have the audio and the video, that's better than only audio. But if you can get in their office and talk to them, that's even better. So again, identify that ideal client. You know, I've got a buddy who he's the nursing home guy for real estate in Texas, and all of Texas is his trade area, because you know that's a very niche thing, right? How many nursing homes are there? Well, I mean, there's a lot of them, but how many of them are going to trade in any given year? Not that many. So he became guy in Texas, and so if you want to buy or sell a nursing home, the real estate, not the operating business, but the real estate, he's your man. He lives here in Plano. His name is Alex Johnson, great guy. And so that's, again, he very narrowly identified his market. The more niche you can get, the easier it's going to be to identify. I have another couple of buddies who are helping an investor who only represents wedding venues. So if you know you're looking for a place for your wedding or for your kid to get married, chances are this guy may own them. He owns like 35 of them in Texas. He's now buying up in Georgia. He's bought in other parts of the country. And these two guys that represent him have done all of his deals, and they've made a bunch of money representing him and buying new locations. So again, if you get to the point where you are the de facto expert at whatever, and you start communicating to the people that are in that ecosystem, you're going to start getting business one way or the other. But if you're just a commercial broker with no differentiating, you know, skills or expertise, good luck to you. It's probably not going to happen very effectively. You'll get a few deals, but it's not going to be a great career.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, comments? Okay.
I have a
So
question. It is relating to commercial real estate, but it's more of like probably assistance. So if I have a client that I've worked with to help get into a commercial leasing space for retail, and the landlord required a 3-year commitment, if for some reason their business was new, if the business does not succeed and the tenant is now looking to get out of that commercial lease, is there a way out of that, even though it's a 3-year, and is it our responsibility as the agent to assist them in that?
So the first thing I would say is it depends on how the lease is written. Very few leases have a termination option for the tenant.
Yeah.
You know, the thing that creates value in a building is consistent cash flow. And so anytime you give an option to a tenant, a landlord gives an option to a tenant for anything, an option to renew, an option to terminate, an option to expand, an option to, you know, right of first refusal to buy the building, any of those kinds of things that they give to a tenant takes away control from the landlord and makes their future cash flow less predictable. So they hate that. And the worst of all those is a termination option. So getting termination options is difficult. When you do get them, it's usually a one-time option at a specific date and time. Let's say, you know, I have a 5-year lease, but I want the option to terminate on the 3rd anniversary. All right, you might be able to negotiate that if you have a tenant that's large enough, has enough power at the moment in the marketplace to do that. If it's not a landlord's market where the landlord can dictate all the terms, But even then, it's difficult, and there would be a termination fee associated with that termination option. And so that termination fee still could be prohibitive to the tenant. If the tenant's
Okay.
business is not doing well, most of the time, the people that create a new business are new to that business, new to that industry. Let's say they bailed out of some other corporate job and now they're opening up a dress shop, or they're opening up a franchise sandwich shop or whatever. They basically put all their money into that. They may go out and get an SBA loan to start that business. They had to personally guarantee the loan.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? They're going to have to personally guarantee that lease as well, not just corporately. So now the entity that they created, the company they created to sign the lease, that's liable, but they're personally liable as well. Now, because I represent tenants exclusively, I'm always trying to find ways to minimize the risk to them. So I want to try and avoid the personal guarantee if I can help it. And if there is a personal guarantee, I want to try and put a limit on how much that is. But again, it's hard, if the company itself is not substantial enough to justify the investment the landlord's going to have to make in the form of commissions and tenant improvement allowances, then it's going to be tough to avoid all that kind of stuff. So, bottom line is there's not a good answer to your question. Typically, what I tell people, especially retail, if you're going to go out and start whatever business you're going to start and you're going to sign a lease, you're going to have to personally guarantee that lease. If the business fails and you don't have enough cash to pay off the landlord for the remainder of the lease term, you're probably going to end up in personal bankruptcy as well. And that's a hard lesson and a hard thing to tell a client, but it's the right thing to tell a client because they need to understand the implications of when they sign that lease.
Understood. Okay. That definitely helps. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And when I was an asset manager, I was the guy that got that call, by the way. I had lots of situations where somebody sent us a letter and said, we can no longer pay the rent. After 9/11 in 2001, I had a dentist of all people send us a letter and say how 9/11 had hurt his business and he wasn't going to be able to keep going on, and he wanted us to reduce his rent or give him rent forgiveness for a period of time. And for some inexplicable reason, he actually mentioned in the letter, and oh, by the way, I'll be debt free in August. And I was like, why would he tell us that? I'm not going to be debt free in August. Why should I help you? And so we basically said, this guy's just trying to take a really horrible situation and abuse it to his advantage. So we basically said, no, we're not going to give you any free rent or rent relief. And he was like, okay, had to try. Thanks a lot. I was like,
wow,
that was terrible. And that ruins it for everybody else, because we did have other people that did seriously have serious problems. And as an asset manager, I had to decide, am I better off? Are my clients, my investors better off trying to work with this tenant, help them out throughout, their tough times, because we think they're ultimately going to survive and pay us back? Or is it better just to cut and run now? And, that's a hard decision to make.
understood.
All right, Bob, we got 3 more minutes. Let's kind of, what kind of golden nuggets you can share with our audience so that they can, make 2022 a great year, or maybe started doing some commercial leasing deals or things like that?
I would say if you're not going to go all in commercial, don't bother. And that, again, that sounds harsh, but commercial is not a place to dabble. If you're going to go in it full time, that's really what you want to be, then more power to you. I'm the first person to cheer you on and to help you. But if you're a dabbler, if you're going to want to sell 25 homes a year and do 3 or 4 leases, I'd say don't bother. You're better off in that situation referring the business that you might be able to get from one of your residential clients to somebody like Calvin or Daniel or myself or whoever, and take the referral fee. That's why I'm better off putting my time toward my ideal client because that's where I'm going to make real money. And then I push the other kinds of stuff, the land listings, the hotels, the retail, all that other kind of stuff. I just refer to other people who that is their specialty. I know the client's going to be served well, and I have a much better chance of actually collecting the 20% referral fee than if I try to do it myself. It's not really what I do, every day. I'm not doing the client a good service, and I'm not doing myself a good service either. So I would say that's the number one thing. Go all in or be a referral machine, and you'll make more money on the referral machine than you will trying to be all things to all people.
I agree. 100% of zero is still zero, right? I mean, that's
Exactly.
why the things, guys, like commercial real estate, it's a pretty broad. It does take time to really master the skill sets and knowledge and terminology and things like that. And again, like just kind of going back to Bob's point is the fiduciary duty, right? So we have to kind of put what will makes sense for the client, right? We have to put that how can we best serve our client? For example, like for me, like I don't do residentials. I will refer my residential folks out. But again, but for learning purposes or anything, like we're here. And of course, if you look at the screen, I have put up, Bob's contact information and email. If you have, any further questions after today's class, feel free to reach out to Bob or myself. And again, like his has a wealth of knowledge. Been in this industry for 30 plus years. Did you see like 3 downturns, right?
Oh man, the early 80s through the mid 90s, then the 2001 tech bust, and the 2008 downturn, and then COVID. So 4 of them, I guess.
Yeah. So you see, yeah, 4. Wow. I mean, and still doesn't scare you. You're still in the business. You're still cranking out, doing a lot of deals, making a lot of money. So that's good.
And this is my specialty. Nobody's going to pay me to do anything else.
Yeah. Well, it's 12:01. There's a survey link that Cherry has posted on the chat box. Like to hear what you guys think about the class and things like that, so we can improve, right? So we are always here to improve, so we can be better and better. Again, Bob, thank you so much for your time and sharing your nuggets and experience. We hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your time. Definitely fill out the survey to help us, get better, improve our class quality and things like that. Thank you so much. Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you soon.